The Vrathi came without warning. Their ships tore through the sky like jagged teeth glowing purple and red, blotting out the sun. They called themselves the Vrathi, a swarm of billions, a hive mind species that had eaten entire galaxies alive. To them, Earth was a snack, a treat. Humans were fragile meat, as one Vrathi warpod broadcast before incinerating a Tokyo suburb. Cities fell first. New York burned. London drowned under acid rain. Beijing vanished in a cloud of ash. The Vrathi didn't negotiate. They didn't ask for surrender. They simply killed. Their weapons were faster than light, their ships armored in something that laughed at bullets and bombs. Earth's armies tried to fight back. Jets launched missiles, submarines fired torpedoes. Soldiers aimed rifles at the sky. But the Vrathi shields turned every attack into sparks. 12 days. That's how long it took for the world to break. On day 1, governments scrambled. Leaders called for unity, for courage, for hope. By day 3, the White House was rubble. By day 7, Russia's president broadcast a trembling plea. They're not stopping. They're not stopping. On day 10, the United Nations collapsed in a pile of twisted steel. And on day 12, the Vrathi Supreme Hive sent a message to every screen on Earth. Kneel or die. The words glowed in blood-red letters across every phone, TV, and billboard. Leaders begged for time. Scientists proposed deals. Religious groups wept and prayed. But the Vrathi gave no deadlines, no mercy. They landed on every continent, their six-legged war machines stomping through ruins, hunting survivors. Those who resisted were dissolved by plasma beams. Those who hid were sniffed out by creatures that looked like living shadows. Humanity's last stand happened in Antarctica. A ragtag army of soldiers, scientists, and civilians gathered at a hidden base near the South Pole. They called themselves the Last Light. They had no plan, no weapons, no chance, but they had rage. One commander, a scarred Australian woman named Captain Mira Voss, stood on a frozen cliff and roared into a comms radio. "Tell the bugs we're not dying quietly." Her voice crackled across the globe, picked up by Vrathi drones and human, survivors alike. For a moment it felt like hope. Then the Vrathi came. They descended in a storm of fire. The Last Light fought with knives, grenades, and stolen Vrathi guns. Mira Voss killed 3 aliens with her bare hands before a screeching monster tore her throat out. The base became a graveyard of ice and ash. When it was over, the Vrathi began rounding up survivors. They herded humans into camps, chaining them. Like cattle, children cried, old people begged, but the Vrathi only hissed, "You are food, you are nothing." Then on a Tuesday morning, the sky split open. It started with a sound, a low, grinding hum that made teeth ache and dogs howl. The clouds above Brazil rippled like water. Then a line of blackness sliced through the heavens, widening into a jagged wound. Something massive pushed through. The first Star Destroyer emerged. It was longer than a skyscraper, black as midnight, its surface covered in glowing blue lines like veins pumping lightning. No nation claimed it. No scientist recognized its design, it just was. Behind it, more tiers opened in the sky. 37 in total. 37 destroyers, each identical, each humming with silent fury. The Vrathi hesitated. A scout drone zoomed toward the nearest destroyer, clicking in excitement. It never got close. A beam of white light lanced out, vaporizing the drone into nothing. The Vrathi fleet scrambled, shields rising, weapons charging. But it was too late. The Star Destroyers fired. Particle beams hotter than stars ripped through the air. Vrathi ships exploded like firecrackers. One destroyer hovered over Rio de Janeiro, its belly opening to reveal a spinning sphere of gold light. The sphere dropped and swallowed an entire alien battalion whole. People watched from hiding places, eyes wide, as the Vrathi screamed and unraveled, their bodies dissolving into gray mist. A Vrathi commander, its face a nightmare of chitin, and glowing eyes, managed to send one transmission before its command ship melted. They're not human. They're monsters. The monsters didn't care. Earth's skies became a battlefield of gods. And for the first time in 12 days, The Vrathi knew fear. The Vrathi had never known fear until now. Their fleet, once unshakable, shattered like glass in a hurricane. Star destroyers hovered over continents, their black hulls humming with power. Beams of white-hot energy sliced through alien warships, turning them into floating debris. In Nairobi, a Vrathi command center melted into a pool of molten slag. In Sydney, a swarm of six-legged drones was reduced to ash before it could fire a single shot. Survivors watched from basements and caves, trembling as the sky rained death. But the destroyers didn't stop at the invaders. Orbital lasers descended from the upper atmosphere, glowing like angry eyes. They targeted Vrathi biosignatures, life forms, that pulsed with a strange green light, and burned them out of existence. A family hiding in a Berlin bunker saw the lasers carve a perfect circle into a nearby hill, vaporizing a hidden Vrathi scout buried beneath. In Mumbai, a mother shielded her child as a beam seared through a building across the street, leaving behind a smoking crater where an alien nest had thrived. The Vrathis scrambled to fight back. Dozens of their ships launched toward the nearest destroyer, firing plasma bolts and sonic pulses. The attacks bounced off the destroyer's hull like pebbles off a tank. Then, without warning, the destroyer spoke. A soundless wave rippled through the air. Ships froze mid-flight. Engines died. Vrathi pilots convulsed as their neural links overloaded, their minds shredded by invisible force. The ships dropped, like stones crashing into cities and forests, killing thousands of their own. On a command ship orbiting Earth, the Supreme Hive trembled. "Assess the threat," hissed the Hive Queen, her voice a chorus of a million minds. "They are not human," replied a trembling technician. "Their weapons bypass shields. Their systems resist our hacks. They do not communicate. They only kill." The Queen's chitinous face twitched. For the first time in centuries, she felt a new sensation. Not rage, not hunger. Fear. "Order retreat," she hissed. The retreat never happened. As Vrathi ships tried to flee, the destroyers deployed something worse than lasers, nanodrones, billions of microscopic machines that swarmed like locusts. They clung to Vrathi hulls, burrowing through metal and flesh alike. Inside a flagship bridge, a commander screamed as the floor beneath him turned to liquid, swallowing him whole. In the engine room of another ship, a Vrathi engineer watched, helplessly as the walls dissolved, revealing a writhing cloud of silver mist. The mist poured in and he became silent. Survivors called it the death rain. It fell in cities across the globe, a green-hued mist that melted everything it touched. In Lagos, a group of refugees huddled in a subway tunnel as the rain seeped through cracks in the ceiling. One drop hit a soldier's boot. The leather vanished. The skin beneath blistered. He screamed, then fell silent as the mist climbed his leg. The others fled, but the rain followed, hunting biosignatures like a predator tracking prey. A child in Mexico City watched from a rooftop as the rain consumed a Vrathi patrol. The aliens shrieked, their exoskeletons crumbling like paper. One fell to its knees, clawing at its face as the mist ate through its eyes. The child didn't cheer. She just whispered, "They're dying like we did." The Vrathi breeding worlds were next. The destroyers vanished from Earth's skies, jumping into hyperspace. They reappeared above the Vrathi's home planets. 3, molten rocks swarming with trillions of the hive creatures. The destroyers didn't hesitate. They launched kinetic bombs, city-sized projectiles that fell from space at unimaginable speed. The first bomb hit the largest breeding world. It struck the ocean, triggering a tsunami that swallowed entire continents. The second bomb carved a crater so deep, it exposed the planet's core. The third bomb shattered the crust entirely, turning the world into a ring of floating debris. On Earth, survivors stared at the sky, unaware of what was happening light years away. Captain Miravos's corpse still lay in Antarctica, half buried in ice. A scavenger stumbled upon her body, her face frozen in a snarl. He took her dog tags and muttered a prayer. Elsewhere, a boy in Tokyo wandered through the ruins of his neighborhood, clutching a charred teddy bear. He hadn't eaten in days. He hadn't cried in longer. Then, the broadcasts began. Vrathi refugees, fleeing in stolen ships, sent messages to every corner of the galaxy. Beware the humans, they warned. They command gods. They do not forgive. They do not forget. Other species listened. A reptilian empire in the Andromeda system canceled its invasion plans. A trade alliance in the Orion Belt voted to avoid Earth's sector entirely. Even the bloodthirsty Zorak clans who'd raised 100 civilizations issued a decree. Do not provoke the genocide planet. Back on Earth, the destroyers returned. They hovered silently over the ruins, their hulls unmarked by battle. No humans dared approach them. No governments claimed responsibility. The world's leaders, what remained of them, gathered in a bunker beneath the Himalayas. They argued for days. Who built these things? Asked a Russian diplomat. Why? Did they wait so long to help us? Demanded a Nigerian general. Do they even care if we live or die? Whispered a scientist, staring at footage of the death rain. No answers came. Decades later, a janitor cleaning an abandoned military base found a dusty file labeled Project Starshatter. It was a relic from the Cold War, a plan to build doomsday ships in case the Soviets launched nukes. The file ended abruptly, scrawled with red ink, activated remotely, source unknown. The janitor burned the file. He didn't want to know. The world didn't celebrate its survival. There was no parade, no flags waving in the wind, survivors huddled in ruins, whispering about what had just happened. The Vrathi were gone, or nearly gone, but the star destroyers still hovered above, the planet like silent gods. Their black hulls gleamed under the sun, unmoving, unblinking. No one knew if they were allies, monsters, or something in between. In the Himalayas, the remnants of Earth's leaders argued inside a bunker carved into the mountains. This isn't victory, said a French diplomat, her voice trembling. We're alive because they decided we should be. She pointed at a screen showing footage of the destroyers. What if they decide we're a threat next? They saved us, snapped a Chinese general. Would you rather be enslaved? By the Vrathi? Maybe we should have fought harder ourselves, muttered a South African soldier. Now we're dependent on machines we don't understand. The debate raged for days, but no answers came. Outside the bunker, the world was broken. Cities lay in ruins. Power grids were dead. Crops had been burned or buried under ash. Survivors scavenged for food, trading bullets for bread, water for bullets. Gangs of raiders roamed the wastelands, preying on the weak. In New York, a group of children built a shelter from the bones of a Vrathi warship, using its leftover energy cells to boil snow into drinkable water. In Siberia, a former scientist wandered through a frozen forest, muttering equations to himself, trying to decode the destroyer's technology. Then the broadcasts started, not from Earth, from space. A signal pulsed across the globe, repeating, in every language humanity had ever spoken. The message was short. Earth, you are warned. Do not provoke the devourers again. No one knew who sent it. The signal came from beyond the solar system, from a direction astronomers had never studied. The destroyers didn't react. They simply hovered, waiting. On a Vrathi refugee ship drifting near Saturn, a wounded commander stared at Earth through a cracked viewport. His body was wrapped in bandages soaked with green blood. His voice was hoarse as he addressed his crew. We thought they were weak, he rasped. But they have allies, or owners. Either way, we're lucky to be alive. His navigator, a female Vrathi with half her face melted off, nodded. We'll spread the word. All species must know. Earth is cursed. The refugees fled deeper into space, carrying tales of a planet protected by gods who killed without mercy. The stories spread like fire. A reptilian warlord in the Andromeda system canceled his invasion fleet. A trade alliance in the Orion Belt voted to avoid Earth's sector entirely. Even the bloodthirsty Zorak clans who'd raised 100 civilizations issued a decree. Do not provoke the genocide planet. Back on Earth, the destroyers began to move. They didn't vanish into hyperspace. Instead, they descended to lower orbits, positioning themselves like guardians. One hovered over the Atlantic Ocean, its shadow stretching for miles. Another parked itself above the Sahara Desert, its hull glowing faintly in the moonlight. The third remained in geostationary orbit above Antarctica, where the last human resistance had fallen. People noticed. In Brazil, a farmer stood in his field and watched the destroyer above him. He'd lost his wife and son to the Vrati, but now he felt watched, protected, trapped. He couldn't tell. In Tokyo, a teenage girl climbed to the top of a ruined skyscraper and stared at the nearest destroyer. She whispered to herself, "Why? Did you save us? Why now?" In the Himalayas, a scientist named Dr. Elena Park stared at the destroyer's data feeds. She'd been part of a secret project before the invasion, studying ancient anomalies in Earth's history. Strange energy readings, unexplained disappearances, myths of sky gods who punished humanity for its sins. Now, she wondered if those myths had been warnings. "We think we're special," she muttered, scrolling through files. "But maybe we're just convenient." Her assistant frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, "what if the destroyers weren't made for us? What if they were made to stop something else?" The assistant paled. "Like what?" Dr. Park didn't answer. She just pointed at a line in an old military document. Project Star Shatter Containment Protocol. Activation triggered only in case of existential threat. Elsewhere, the death rain returned. It fell in patches, sudden bursts of green, mist that melted anything it touched. In Kenya, a Vrathi scout hiding in a cave was reduced to a puddle of sludge. In Alaska, a group of miners stumbled upon a cluster of nanodrones, their silver mist clinging to their skin until they screamed and collapsed. The survivors called it cleansing. "They're making sure nothing Vrathi is left," said a Russian engineer watching the rain from a bunker. "But what happens when there's nothing left to kill?" No one had an answer. Then came the first signs of something worse. In the Pacific Ocean, a destroyer vanished. Not into hyperspace. Vanished. One moment it was there, casting its shadow over the waves. The next it was gone, leaving behind a perfect circle of still water. Days later, the same thing happened near the Amazon rainforest. Then over the Arctic. People panicked. Some thought the destroyers were leaving. Others feared they'd been destroyed. But then the broadcasts changed. Instead of warnings, the signals began playing static. Not random noise. Patterns. Beeps. Tones. Voices speaking in languages no one recognized. The static grew louder every day. In London, a deaf woman named Clara Morgan felt vibrations in her bones whenever the signals played. She drew shapes in the dirt, matching the rhythms. The Liyar shapes looked like constellations. "They're calling someone," she signed to her daughter. Or something. Her daughter didn't understand. In the Himalayas, Dr. Park stared at the destroyer's data feeds again. The static wasn't random. It was a message. "They're not leaving," she whispered. "They're summoning." Her assistant dropped his coffee mug. "Summoning what?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the screen where the static had formed a single word in English. The world held its breath. The static broadcasts had stopped. The destroyers hovered in silence. But something had changed. In the weeks since the last Vrathi nest was erased, Earth's survivors had felt it. A pressure in the air, a hum in the bones like a storm waiting to break. In the Himalayan bunker, Dr. Elena Park stared at her monitors, her fingers trembling as she replayed the last signal. The word reinforcement still glowed on her screen, but now it was gone, replaced by a single pulsing dot. She leaned closer. The dot wasn't random. It was a countdown. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Outside, the world was unraveling. The ruins of New York. Scavengers fought over canned food and Vrathi tech. A gang leader named Jax, his face scarred by plasma burns, stood atop a crumbling skyscraper and roared at his men. "We take what we can before the sky eats us all." Below, a teenage girl named Lila slipped through alleys, clutching a stolen energy cell. She'd traded her last meal for it, but she didn't care. The cell would power her brother's breathing mask for another day. In Siberia, the former scientist wandering the frozen forest finally collapsed. His journal, soaked in snow and blood, listed equations about the destroyer's energy signatures. One page read, "They're not machines. They're weapons. But weapons need hands to hold them." In Tokyo, the teenage girl who'd watched the destroyers from the skyscraper climbed higher. Her name was Aiko, and she'd been following the machine's movements for weeks. She'd mapped their orbits, timed their shifts, and noticed something others hadn't. The destroyers weren't guarding Earth, they were blocking it. "They're keeping something out," she muttered, sketching constellations in the dust. But what? Back in the Himalayas, Dr. Park got her answer. The countdown reached 0. The sky split open. This time it wasn't the destroyers. A new tier formed above Antarctica, wider and darker than before. From it poured a fleet unlike anything humanity had seen. Sleek silver ships shaped like daggers, their hulls shimmering with shifting colors. They moved in perfect unison, like a school of fish. The destroyers reacted instantly. Beams of white-hot energy lanced toward the newcomers, but the silver ships twisted mid-air, dodging with impossible speed. One destroyer fired a particle beam. That should have vaporized a continent. The lead silver ship sliced through the beam like paper, splitting it in half. The destroyers hesitated. For the first time, they faltered. Their formations broke. They scattered, evading attacks that came too fast to track. One destroyer exploded in a burst of black fire, its hull shattering like glass. Another vanished into hyperspace, abandoning the fight. The silver ships descended. They didn't target cities. They didn't hunt humans. Instead, they landed in the most barren places on Earth: Antarctica, the Sahara, the Mariana Trench. From their bellies emerged creatures that looked like living shadows, their forms flickering like static. They moved, without sound, leaving no footprints. Aiko watched from her skyscraper as one of the creatures approached a Vrathi corpse half buried in Tokyo's ruins. The creature bent down, touched the alien skull, and dissolved it into dust. "They're cleaning up," she realized. Like the destroyers did. But the cleaning didn't stop at Vrathi. In Siberia, the shadow creatures found the dead scientist's journal. They took it. In New York, they scanned Jax's gang as they looted a Vrathi warship. One of the gang members screamed when the creature brushed his arm. The scream died in his throat, his body collapsing into a pile of ash. Lila ran. She sprinted through the ruins, clutching her energy cell, but the creatures followed. One appeared in front of her, taller than a building, its form shifting like smoke. She dropped the cell and fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please," she whispered. "My brother needs this." The creature paused. It tilted its head, as if studying her. Then it vanished. The cell still lay in the dirt. By the end of the day, the creatures had vanished too. The silver ships withdrew into the rift, which closed behind them like a wound stitching itself shut. The destroyers reformed their silent watch over Earth, but they were fewer now. 7 had been destroyed. Dr. Park stared at her monitors, her face pale. "They weren't reinforcements," she said. "They were inspectors." Her assistant frowned. "Inspectors for what?" She didn't answer. She just pointed at the last frame of footage from the silver ships. A symbol burned into the sky, glowing faintly where the rift had been. It looked like an eye surrounded by jagged lines. "The Devourers," she whispered. Back in the Himalayas, a new broadcast pulsed across the globe. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a command. "Earth, you have been spared. For now, do not fail again." No one knew who sent it. The destroyers didn't react. But the message spread. Refugees in Africa whispered it around campfires. Soldiers in Europe carved it into bunkers. Children in Asia drew it in the dirt, tracing the shape of the eye. Aiko added it to her constellation map. "They're not protecting us," she muttered. "They're testing us." She looked at the destroyers above, then at the symbol in her notes. What happens when we fail? No one had an answer. But in the Pacific Ocean, where a destroyer had vanished weeks earlier, the water began to churn. Something was coming back. And this time, it wasn't alone. The world didn't break. Not this time. But it bent. After the silver ships vanished and the eye symbol burned itself into the sky, Earth's survivors did what they always did. They endured. Cities rebuilt themselves from ash and rust. Farmers coaxed life from poisoned soil. Children were born into a world that still smelled like fire, but they laughed anyway. But beneath the surface, fear festered. In the Himalayas, Dr. Elena Park stared at the eye symbol etched into her monitor. She'd analyzed every pixel, every angle. It wasn't just a warning, it was a seal. A brand. They're watching, she muttered. Waiting. Her assistant, a wiry man named Malik, nodded. For what? She didn't answer. She just replayed the final broadcast from the Devourers. Do not fail again. The phrase haunted the world. In Tokyo, Aiko traced the symbol onto the walls of abandoned buildings, her fingers smearing charcoal as she whispered, "They're testing us. But for what?" She'd stopped sleeping, her dreams filled with shadow creatures and silver ships. By day, she mapped the destroyers' orbits. By night, she wandered the ruins, searching for answers in the bones of dead Vrathi. In New York, Lila sold the stolen energy cell for medicine. Her brother survived, but his cough never went away. Gangs still fought over scraps, but now they carved the eye symbol into their weapons. Jax, the scarred warlord, stood atop his tower and roared, "We don't need gods watching us, we take what's ours." But even he flinched when the destroyers shifted in the sky. Then the Pacific Ocean began to bleed. It started as a ripple, a dark stain spreading across the waves, glowing faintly green. Fishermen fled. Drones sent to investigate melted midair. Government sent warnings, stay away. But curiosity is a human disease. Aiko went first. She stole a rusted boat and sailed toward the stain, her notebook clutched in her hand. When she reached the center, the water turned to glass. Beneath it, something stirred. A shape rose from the depths. A destroyer, but wrong. Its hull was cracked, its glowing blue veins flickering like dying embers. But worst of all, the eye symbol was carved into its bow. The ship groaned. A hatch hissed open. From inside came a sound like static, then a voice. Not human, not machine. Lesser species. You have been judged. Aiko didn't run. She couldn't. The voice seeped into her bones, paralyzing her. Then the destroyer moved. It lurched forward, dragging her boat with it. The sea boiled. The sky darkened. And the eye symbol in her notebook began to glow. When she returned days later, she wasn't the same. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands trembled. She spoke only one word. Prepare. Dr. Park tried to study the IA, changed destroyer. She called it infected. Its systems were corrupted, its targeting protocol scrambled. It no longer killed only Vrathi biosignatures. Now it hunted everything. In the Sahara, the infected destroyer glassed a refugee camp, turning sand to glass and people to shadows. In the Arctic, it fired a beam into the ice, releasing a cloud of ancient spores that turned animals into ravenous monsters. Survivors fled, but the destroyer followed, leaving a trail of chaos. They're not testing us anymore, Malik whispered. They're punishing us. Dr. Park shook her head. Or maybe we're the test. The eye symbol spread, like a virus. It appeared on walls, carved into mountains, burned into crops. Some worshipped it, forming cults that chanted, "The Devourers see us." Others tore it down, screaming, "We won't be slaves." Wars erupted over its meaning. A soldier in Brazil painted it on his tank before crushing a village. A girl in Kenya scratched it into her arm, whispering, "I'm ready." Lila's brother died during the riots. She buried him in a crater where a destroyer had once landed. She didn't cry. She just stared at the sky and asked, "Why did you save us if you hate us so much?" No answer came. The Devourers stayed silent, but the destroyers didn't. One by one, they began to fall. In the Atlantic, a destroyer imploded mid-orbit, its debris raining fire on Africa. Over Antarctica, another vanished, leaving behind a hole in the ice that pulsed with green light. In the Amazon, a destroyer landed and opened its belly, releasing a swarm of black tendrils that burrowed into the earth. They're dying, Dr. Park realized, or committing suicide. Malik pointed at a new signal blinking on their monitors. It wasn't a countdown this time. It was a heartbeat. Slow. Weak. They're asking for help, he said. They're asking for mercy, she corrected. But who could save gods? Iko disappeared into the wilds following the infected destroyer's trail. Lila joined a gang that raided bunkers for supplies. Dr. Park stayed in the Himalayas, decoding the heartbeat signal until her hands bled. Years passed. The world grew darker. The last destroyer hovered over the Himalayas, its hull cracked, its glow fading. It loomed over the bunker where Dr. Park had spent her life. One night it spoke, not in static, but in her own voice. Elena, you have been judged. She fell to her knees. Judged for what? For surviving. The destroyer. Fired. The mountain exploded, but the signal didn't die. In the ruins, Lila found Dr. Park's journal, its pages filled with equations and the I symbol. She took it and kept walking. Iko, older now, her hair streaked with gray, stood atop a cliff and watched the last destroyer crash into the sea. It sank slowly, its light fading like a dying star. They're gone, she whispered. But in the Pacific, the infected destroyer still drifted, and in the void beyond the solar system, the eye blinked. Earth was quiet. Too quiet. Somewhere, the devourers were waiting, and next time they wouldn't send machines.